Scott, your host now. Please make me the co-host.
Okay, you're all set.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Abbott, how are you?
Oh, just peachy.
I snuck you in here a little early so I can make you co-host.
Great. I'm going to put a different background up. Nobody needs to see my office space, right?
Never, it's whatever floats your boat. Okay, there you go. I love that picture. I've seen that before.
Yeah. Or did you like the owl eyes?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to try to find the owl eyes again.
Okay, here we go.
I've got postnasal drip today. We've had such weather around.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so I may be a little drippy today.
Now, sorry about that.
It happens, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey,
How
hey
are you
there,
today?
everybody.
Hi there.
Look at all these
Hey
people.
there.
showing up.
So,
Hello.
you read what's going on, so I'll be here in spirit for the next hour, but I'll definitely be back in person in about 2 or 3.
Okay.
So I am watching you just later than you're watching me.
Okay. That sounds
So,
great.
Looking forward to
getting-
it. Should be fun.
Yeah, glad you're getting to see your son too.
Yeah, me too. It's been 2 years.
Yeah,
We just,
wow.
We just sat and had pho that I got from the Vietnamese restaurant, which I haven't had for 2 years also. Last time I had it was with my son. It's something we both really like. So got to enjoy it while I can. I think you understand, but I don't want to miss this either. So I'll be watching it later.
No, that was a
Have
good
that
idea
owl
you
stare
had.
at me.
Yeah, that was a good
I'll
idea
have
you
your-
had to sign in.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Give it another couple
Have
minutes
fun.
for everybody to stay in.
Scott, did you get that link I sent you?
I did. I emailed you back. That was very interesting.
I
had
thought it was too. I had no idea.
yeah. And you know what? I am walking. I don't know if this is enough rattling to really make a difference, but I when I mow the lawn, I have my phone because I listen to podcasts while I'm mowing the lawn. And I have just one of those battery powered mowers.
Oh, okay. It's not a ride-on mower.
Yeah, so it's not like, yeah, and I'm just pushing it. So it's not doing a whole lot of rattling, but I don't know if there's enough vibration there to.
Yeah, I thought that was taking interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So Carol Sue was telling me about this, or she sent me an article that the image stabilization in smartphones can really get knocked out of whack if you are riding a motorcycle with your cell phone a lot or doing something else that really causes a lot of vibration. So,
actually, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens with a lot of cameras.
Yeah, me either.
Just because of the way it
especially
works.
with all that built-in image stabilization they have now. Yeah, just looking.
Oh, look what Deathlift did. It's as if Deathlift is sort of here.
Yeah. It works great. So for anybody who is in the lounge and would like to join us in the live studio here, just please feel free to hit that enter button, that orange enter button on the side of your screen in the lounge, and you'll flow in.
And it seems that I'm not hearing any echoes this time. Does that mean that the problem we had last time was fixed?
I'm not sure what's going on, but I usually see a stream of myself in the lounge and I'm not seeing it. Is everybody else seeing me in the lounge or okay?
Oh, I see what happened. Once I logged in, it switched over to Zoom.
Okay. That may be what happened to me too.
It looks like that's what's going on. So you can be in one or the other, but not both.
Yeah.
If you are in the lounge and then you enter, it'll go through. But if you go in and click to, once your time comes up, you click enter, it skips the lounge, it goes directly to you, because that's what I did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, well, so they're working through some glitches, Scott.
Yeah. Slowly but surely. So welcome to Mike and Sandy, Karen's here, and Kathy and Johnny. Good to see everybody. And to all you, and I think Mary dropped a note in the chat, so a big welcome to her as well. And I am going to go ahead and just get us started. I'm going to share a couple of little plugs here at the beginning and then turn it over to Abbott. But let me call this up. Any day now. All right, so here we go. So just these are usually slides I put at the beginning or at the end of the class, but just a little plug for some of the related classes coming up. Most of you know about these, the focus on photography tomorrow at 4. And then of course the photo challenge of the week. A reminder, this week it is hats. So whatever you want to send, whether it's a beret, a fancy bonnet, anything like that, or a bowler. My next classes are, I have one tomorrow, Saving Face, Touching Up Portraits and Selfies, and Google Photos Part 2. And you can also look here for all the other classes. If you hit the Explore button in the lounge, you'll see all the other classes we offer. There is that plug for the photo challenge, and you can just submit your pictures to this email address, which I'll have a link to all of this in the class notes that come out afterward, along with some handouts from Abbott. And I keep forgetting to update this, but these are due tomorrow. So Wednesday, September 20, I think it's 29th. Yeah. So, and then we'll get together Friday at 4 to share and chat. And for anybody who hasn't done this before, you just send a photo in based on the theme. And then on Friday, we get together and vote for our favorite. And the top vote getter gets a Get Set Up prize, possibly a cap like this. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there and turn it over to Abbott.
So let's see if I can find it. Did I find it?
Yep, you sure did.
Okay. And it's covering your whole screen now, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to everybody. And by the way, I love it if you turn your cameras on so I can see who's participating. And when we have our interchange, it helps me to relate with a person. So you don't have to be shy. If you want to, turn your cameras on, and hopefully we'll have some good discussion as well as me just spewing. So I'll do this. A lot of you don't know me yet. I'll tell you a little bit about me. you see the line of some of the cameras I've owned over time. And I like pointing out this little Coolpix 990 because that camera was probably 25 years ago. And I like to think of it as my first real mirrorless camera with a tilting LCD in the back. So, you know, there's a lot of hype right now about mirrorless cameras, and usually people are talking about mirrorless as a replacement to an SLR, but I think everybody's got a mirrorless. If you have a cell phone, you got a mirrorless. So anyway, I've had a bunch of cameras. I'm a technical guy, so I'm trying to develop my artistic sense. That's why I studied a lot of composition. I did some biomedical research, a lot of computer technology. I live in Central Oregon, and a lot of the photography I do now is for like museums and some charitable organizations. And I teach occasional classes. I participate in a lot of workshops, and I just try to have fun because all of you folks who are retired know that retirement, at least as I look at it, is a 7x24x365 job, and you got to keep the job moving. So I thought I'd start out last week. At the very end, I gave you guys an exercise to do, you know, called it kind of homework. And how many people who did that? Who tried this? Is anybody besides Scott and me going to talk about this stuff? Okay, well, let's unmute phones and unmute if you want to. And you didn't really have to do a lot of this last week, but I'd like to just talk about this for a few minutes today, because what makes images more compelling is how clear an idea you have in your head about what you're trying to accomplish. And part of it also is understanding how you see the world around you, what you tend to focus on first, how your eye moves around the scene that you're looking at, and you know what it really was that drew your attention in the first place. Okay, and so the idea last week was to have you go someplace where you're really familiar. It could have even been a room in your house, and look around it and maybe see it in a different way. And then do the same thing in a whole new place and understand how you are seeing that place. So somebody, would you like to tell about what you saw in your familiar scene? This could just be between you and me, Scott. It looks like we got shy people here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can get the ball rolling. My familiar scene is a path that I take a lot on walks through. It's a park near my house, and I walk my dog there. My wife and I take walks there, and I am so much more aware of curves, S-curves, and there are a lot on this path. So that seems to be drawing my attention more than anything else these days. And yeah, I'm starting to notice every one of them as I'm walking this path. And it just kind of makes me, I feel like I'm sort of swaying through the scene ahead of me.
That's really neat. And part of the reason that it's neat, aside from that you saw it, is that you're thinking now about sort of like mapping cues, visual cues into how you see a scene. And that's going to help compose images that help your eye flow through a scene. So that was really good. Did you by any chance try a new place?
I did. Relatively new. I'd only been there one time before, and I hadn't gotten out in the surroundings, but some friends of ours just moved to Frederick, Maryland, to this rural area right outside of Frederick. So we went up there to visit them, and it's a very bucolic community they live in. We went on just a walk through the woods, and I was really noticing there the circular nature of the landscape, I guess, in that it was a lake, and yeah, I don't know how else to describe it other than I was sort of watching a little bit of a curve that went around that lake along the shoreline, and noticing a lot of detail there. I also was there's a little waterfall there, so I was really paying attention to that, seeing the different ways that the water went as it hit the rocks, and I was imagining taking a long exposure of that, but that's me.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I'm coming out of depression. I've had been in depression for a couple of years. And one of the things that happened to me when I was in depression was that I lost all sense of color. There's only black and whites and grays, essentially. And so now it's quite fantastic that I'm feeling better, and my medications and things have been kind of toned up, and I think the depression is in the rearview mirror, but it's never far behind me, so to speak. That that it's the world is much more glorious and much more appealing with the colors, and it's just fantastic to be able to see greens and different shades of greens, and with the leaves starting to change. We're just barely starting to see here in North Carolina. We're down in the Piedmont, starting to see some of the leaves fall, and a little bit of yellow and a little bit of red, but that's just something that I think that we take for granted, is that when you're sick, I think a lot of things lose their color, and color is kind of gives you a sense of euphoria or a sense of wonder and amazement, and so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good lead-in for part of what we're going to talk about today too.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that, Co. And I'm really glad. I'm really glad that's in the rearview mirror.
Me too. Hopefully, it stays there.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything to say for this before we move on to new stuff?
Regarding a scene, a familiar scene, I mean, I haven't actually photographed it, but I did notice I went to see a new scene. And on the way back from the new scene, and I haven't been out of London, so just getting a bus down through Regent Street in London, I did notice from the top deck of the bus, because we had famous double-decker buses, some alleys and things that I haven't explored before. So I've made a mental note that there's a couple of alleys, and one of them's got really nice lights that might be worth going back and exploring. But I was actually zipping down Regent Street in London on a bus. So that's a scene I'm familiar with. I thought I knew Regent Street, but from the top deck of a bus, I could spot things that I didn't spot walking along the pavement. So it's going to beg a return at some point, because at the moment I normally concentrate my photograph to East London, which is a bit prettier, but that sounds quite good. And the new scene, the only new thing I've seen this week was that something called The Mound. I don't suppose you've heard of it over there, but it's an artificial hill they've built near Hyde Park Corner, a place called Marble Arch in London. And it's caused great controversy. It's about 200 foot high, and it's made of scaffolding covered in artificial grass and flowers. And they were going to charge people £4 each to go up it and look at the view. And to be honest, the view is absolute crap. And it's got a lot of rubbish in the place. You can't see anything up there. There's too many higher buildings around it, and you can see absolutely nothing. And it is complete rubbish. So now they're letting everybody up there for nothing. You have to book in advance online, but it's free to go up. But the good thing about it is on the way down, they've actually put in a light show in the basement of it, in a dark room, which is what that thing is behind me, and it's all these mirrors and glass and everything. That's quite pretty. But the only thing that I found noticeable from the top of this infamous mound, which apparently cost £4 million, and the deputy leader of Westminster Council's had to resign because of a scandal. But anyway, that's by the by. The only thing I could notice was it's very good for actually looking down at street view and getting photographs straight down at people on the street, as opposed to the supposed vista we were all going to be rewarded with, which was rubbish. And there was actually some sort of festival going on with Shia Muslims were having a little shindig on the grass beside it, because there's a lot of them live around there. And there's a chap with a big drum. So that attracted my attention. That was a new scene. So going up this mound was new. I'm not going to go up it again, but looking at the street from above it was quite new. To look down on the street from 200 feet was a bit different.
So you were looking at it sounds like you were looking at these two scenes from a what could I take a photograph of kind of.
Yeah, exactly, because the views were rubbish. I mean, you could see things like the Shard and the London Eye in the distance, but they were a long, long way away, and they were partly concealed by taller buildings, and it was complete rubbish. I don't know I don't know his idea, because he's resigned, but to put this thing up and thought people would pay £4 to go up it.
Okay, so
But the thing was to find something to photograph, and the photograph was looking straight down at the street below and see what was going on below it, as opposed to trying to look at the view. And
okay, so that's kind of interesting, because what you just described is you filtered, you looked at the scene, and then you had a filter on that said, oh, that's rubbish. Oh, that might be interesting. It might be useful to think about, why did you think it looked interesting, and how did you get to there first? Did you have to discard all the rubbish, or were you just...
you walked around and you looked and you thought, no, I don't know why they put this up here. It's complete nonsense. Really ruins. It's a big roundabout system with a really old arch, which used to be the entrance to Hyde Park, but since they put in the one-way system, it's away from it now. It's quite a nice place. It's got fountains and a nice little lake and a green area where people can have activities. And then they stuck this thing up in the middle of it, which has ruined the whole thing. But it's, but I say, we went up there, and after a while, we realised that the interest was looking straight down at the street and not trying to look at the view, because the view was rubbish and it just wasn't worth photographing. Wasn't worth wasting a click.
Okay, good. For those of
you who London, don't go up it.
For those of you who did not do this exercise, maybe give it a try, because this is how to train your eye to understand what you're seeing, how you view things, and that'll help you get stronger images. Okay, let's go on to some new stuff. Let me see if this is going to be good. Okay, so I wanted to remind you that with vision, that vision is the art of seeing the invisible. Okay, so you look at something and it'll strike you right away, but then you might look beyond the obvious and see some implied things, some other objects in the scene that you can work with. And then you've got some building blocks to composition, and we're going to take a little deeper look at some of those today. That's how we take in the world. Jeff just did a really good description of how he took in a couple of parts of his world and how objects are arranged in the image. So part of what I was hoping to get from that last exercise was for you to notice what your eye went to first and how your brain was kind of translating the objects that you saw. And I'll talk more about that today. And then I want to remind you that you've got two opportunities for composition. One of them is when you're standing there with the camera, smartphone, whatever your device is that you're going to capture the image with. And you can move around a bit. You can zoom in and out a bit. And you can, do things to try to arrange the scene in your frame to a certain extent. And then you've got another approach, another opportunity that some people don't think about too much, and that is post-processing. Sometimes you let the camera do all the post-processing and you get a JPEG out. But even when you get that, if you went into other software, there's free opportunities and some paid opportunities. But when you go into software, you can crop, you can adjust the lighting, you can bring out shadows and highlights, and you can really tune what you captured with the device itself. So that's really important to keep in mind. And every photographer I know of tends to take advantage of both of those opportunities. Okay, the elements, when I think about it, the elements of image creation include the technical stuff. You've got your technique. It's how you work the camera, how you tend to move the camera around, where you tend to position yourself. You've got a lot of control over perspective by what lens you use, where you stand relative to the subject, and how you hold the camera. Also, you've got lighting. And so sometimes, you find that when the light is coming straight on front to the subject looks kind of flat. In the evening and early hours, they're called the golden hours. You get this nice warm light that casts a nice glow over the image and can be done at an angle, so you get some nice depth. Paying attention to colors and things like that. And then you've got composition, where you creatively assemble the stuff in front of you, like these two owl eyes. And by the way, my reflection is in those owl eyes. So I've got the two owl eyes, and where I stand relative to the owl is going to control, to an extent, even how that simple owl looks. So the eyes and the eyebrows in this owl are ingredients. And if I want me to be in it like I am, I'm an ingredient also. So I can move myself over and really change the way things work. So then, in addition to that, we've got spontaneity and timing. And sometimes you need to know when something's going to happen. Like, for example, last year we had a really nice comet visible. I think it was in the whole Northern Hemisphere, but definitely where I live. Knowing where that was going to be and when that was going to be up, let me set my camera up in the middle of the night on my driveway and get some really good pictures of that comet. If I didn't know when and where, forget it. Same thing is true of if there's going to be a special event through your city or something like that, or a birthday party, or if you can anticipate when a kid is going to do his activities in front of the camera. So it helps to go and have timing as well.
Abbott, question for you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you leave the house? Do you always leave the house with the camera, or I mean, do you say I'm going to go out and take pictures, and so I'm going to take the camera with me, or do you always looking for those serendipity shots or spontaneous unseen visions, or as you put it? So how do you, it's kind of like the guy who's the security, the bodyguard for a security, for personality, let's say for Celine Dion, they're trained every time they go into a restaurant, every time they go into a supermarket, every time they go into the tire store, they're looking for the exits. They're looking for the dangers around them, for the possible things that could, be treacherous. And so does the camera absorb a large part of your brain, so to speak?
No, so that's kind of a multi-level layered question. First of all, I hardly ever have a camera with me. I do not have a cell phone. So I don't have that device with me, which most people have all the time. So when I'm going out with the camera, it's to take pictures. I also, by the way, purposely leave the camera home sometimes Like when my doggie, who's sleeping next to me, when she and I go out every day, we go out for about a 4 or 5 mile walk every day. I leave the camera home, even though things can change, because sometimes I want to just enjoy what's there. Sometimes I'm with a friend who may not want to be involved with the camera. And other times, though, I have an idea that I want to go out and shoot. Now, when I'm around the house, the cameras are always in the house. So, for example, the other day, there were some bird opportunities outside. And like even right now, there's a bird sitting at arm's length from me. So when something neat like that happens, I'll run in the house and set the camera up really fast. But otherwise, I go somewhere to take pictures or I go somewhere to not. And if I'm somewhere where I don't have the camera and something happens, it's like, oh, well, at least I can see it. And if I go somewhere with the camera hoping to get something and it doesn't happen, I say, oh, well, at least I was here.
Okay, so most of your photography then is intentional and not serendipity.
Well, it's intentional. Okay, so it's intentional in that I carry the camera. But when I get that Cooper's hawk suddenly diving off of a tree in front of me, now that's serendipity. That's timing. You see what I mean? Or when I go, I really like taking pictures at some of the local rodeos. So when I go to the rodeo with a camera, that's purposely going to take pictures. When I get a picture of the cowboy doing something neat, or the little kid holding on to the sheep at at their activity, the actual activity, the incident happened, I call that serendipity. Does that kind of communicate it?
Yeah, it's just one of your comments last week was that something to the effect that I think great photographers are basically artists, and you talked about the photographer whose home you went to or went to visit, and all he had was art books on his coffee tables and in his bookcase. So, I think that an artist, a lot of times they it's a religion almost, and they live for that image or for that that special event. So I just curious. So yours is more intentional and not serendipity that it happens.
Well, actually, that particular photographer. So let me clarify a little bit. We were talking about composition last time. Composition is, in my mind, mostly an artistic endeavor, as opposed to working the camera, which is more of a technical endeavor. And what I was saying was the photographers whose compositions I've been most inspired with, and the people who I think are more artistic photographers, those guys, a lot of them were trained as artists, like the particular one you were talking about. And when I was at that particular photographer's home, and I was looking forward to seeing what books does this guy have that I can learn from. And he had art books, not photography books. And he said, like others that I've heard say similar things, he said he'll go out to take pictures, and he is deliberate. He doesn't always carry a camera either. But when he goes out with a camera, it's with a purpose. And sometimes he gets inspiration from some of those art books he's got. He'll look at the style of an art master, and he might say, today I'd like to try to kind of replicate what that impressionist did in some photos. And so he'll try to do photos in what he might call an impressionist style after so-and-so. He won't write that in his book. He won't say, I took this picture because I was trying to go and see what I could do like that. But that's kind of how he gets inspiration. I've heard 2 or 3 other photographers who were trained as artists say similar things. Okay. That was good, Co. Way to go. Okay,
Yeah,
so last week, and I may be mixing some things. We talked in this class, but also a lot of us are in a Wednesday and a Friday sharing session. And this topic has come up a couple of times about being a faithful photographer, faithfully capturing what you see on the camera. And I thought it would be helpful to talk about this again in this class. So, you know, a lot of the context is, well, are you a realist or are you a photoshopper? And so many people say, including me, I'm a realist. I try to capture faithfully what I saw. And then there are those who say, well, I'm going to go replace the sky if I want. I'm going to go artistically manipulate it because I view what the camera got as a starting point. Then there's a lot of people in between. So I wanted us to think about reality for a minute and how the camera captures the image. And for starters, the world is three-dimensional. You look out there, there's no such thing as a two-dimensional world. You may look at a two-dimensional picture, but then there's the rest of the world around it. And the world itself is 3 dimensions. So what the camera is giving us is a static representation of a 3-dimensional dynamic world. And when you look at the real world, like what Scott was saying before, where he was watching the S-curves, when we look at the real world has a lot of cues that our eye takes in. Remember, vision is what our eye sees, keeping in mind that what the eye gives to the brain is an upside down image and the brain writes it, right? So the eye is sending upside down and backwards to the brain immediately makes it sensible. But then when the brain is looking, we are used to seeing certain cues in the world, and we understand, for example, that if we see something big next to something small, if it looks like those are about the same kind of object, like 2 people, we're going to assume that the big one is closer than the little one, because that's what we've been trained to do. If it turns out that you had a giant and a midget standing next to each other, we just got screwed up. But based upon our training, you know, what we've learned all our lives, the first pass is, given no other information than there's these 2 people, I'm going to assume that the little one is farther away, or a tree, or a building, or anything else. Okay, so hopefully I got that idea of, we assess, we make some decisions, and that's how we view the world. Then, oh, we're going to have some fun. We've got perceived or processed color versus real color. And hopefully anybody here who's ever had a cataract removed will relate with this, because cataracts absorb, I think it's blue light they absorb. And if you've got cataracts, and I've heard this from several people who had cataracts removed, and they said, wow, the world changed color. It's a whole lot more on the red side now. It's a whole lot more vibrant because the cataract was absorbing. I mean, it's a whole lot more on the blue side. I see more of these blues because the cataract was absorbing the blue. And in fact, one of my eyes has a little cataract starting. I'll never get it removed. The doctor says it ain't bad enough. But if I close one eye and then the other eye, I can see that one eye is definitely seeing things a little redder than the other eye. And my brain averages things out just like your brains do. So when you're saying, I'm going to be really accurate with color, well, what does that mean? It means whatever you perceived. And oh, by the way, if you tend to edit on a monitor, on a computer screen that isn't color calibrated, you don't know what the real color is anyway. You're just working off of what you see, which is fine. So we have this idea of real color. It's whatever our eye sees or we think we see. And then you process it. So your camera might capture light, energy, and convert it and do internal processing to make a JPEG image, or we can use post-processing software. But the idea of real color is kind of hard to really get at. So let's look at some examples. I told you I try to have some fun. So here I've got a nice gradient. Can everybody see the nice gradient? Goes from white to black, okay? Now look at that bar. Do you see how it goes the opposite direction? Pretty amazing, huh? That bar is a constant color all the way across. And what our brain did is it put everything in the right perspective. It took the background into account when it looked at the foreground, and it biased the foreground to make everything fit in the way that we're conditioned to fitting it. I thought that was kind of fun. Okay, now look at this picture. Oh, did somebody come into the chat just now?
I think Co just said,
I need to carry an iPhone. No. Thank you, Co. No. Okay, so here's another one. And take a look at these two. Clearly, this is a three-dimensional scene, right? So, and we've got some different shades of gray, except if I block out the center, see that? I just blocked out the dividing line and they were the same color. So you see how our brain, based upon the cues that look three-dimensional, we automatically assumed that this is just a shaded part of that, whereas in fact, they're the same exact color. This is how our training, our experience biases us to see things in a certain way. Okay, let's get to have some more fun. This is the last fun for a little while. So here we have, this is not a rubrics cube, but it's a cube. And I want you to pay attention, nothing up my sleeves. Pay attention to the two different shades, that kind of sienna brown and the kind of dirt brown. You got the squares? Would you believe if they're the same color? There they are. Isn't that something? Because the surrounding colors cause our eye to react a certain way, cause our brain to react a certain way. We interpret the same color in two different ways based upon its surrounding colors. So now we can talk again about what's the real color, right? So sometimes the way this applies is you're looking at a scene and you say, I want to capture that color. And you take a picture, you do whatever you need to do in the camera to make it look as close as you can on your LCD in the back. Then you get home and you look at the picture and say, that's not the way I remember it. I remember these colors, exactly these colors, and darn it, they came out the same. Well, that's one thing you do in the post-processing is you try to get the colors to look the way you remember. Another way of putting that is you try to assign some of your brain interpretations to what the camera faithfully captured. Okay, now was that fun? That was kind of fun. Okay, so we synthesize based upon experiential knowledge using the cues in front of us, like I just showed. The real world has a lot of cues. Images have many, many fewer cues. So it's up to us when we capture the image to take advantage of the strong elements we can see to make them into cues that are going to help guide the viewer's eye in the final picture, regardless of where the picture is. It could be on a billboard, it could be on your Facebook page, Instagram, a print on the wall, it doesn't matter. So the way image creation can be done is when our eye is attracted to something, then you look at what it is that attracted you and then start to think about how does that translate into an image? Might I need to do something to move around or change my perspective to make that a stronger element in the image? Okay, so I think about what's there in front of me and then try to create an interesting image using elements that we'll talk about next time. Scott's already presented those in other sessions, and we've kind of talked about them in several sessions, and I'm going to do a more formal presentation of them next time. Okay, so in reality, when we see, like, remember that the two meeting surfaces I showed where we interpreted that there was a shadow, and we colorized the two elements based upon our interpretation. That's luminance that we were looking at. Because of the way luminance was, we attached a certain implication to that. So luminance tends to imply shadows, and then reflectance, like what might reflect in your glasses or in a window, that is relative to the amount of light reflected by certain objects. So like if you look in a window, and you look at the reflection of a scene in a park. So go look at a park scene reflected in a parked car's window. And you'll see that, bright things, of course, are going to be lighter, and dark things don't reflect very much at all. And that's part of the cues that we take when we look at an image. But when we look at an image, we don't have all the reference around that image. So as in processing, we might want to go and bring out the shadows or subdue the highlights a bit to try to put things into the balance that we saw when we first looked into that reflected window. Okay, the way we perceive things is when we see things in shadow, we tend to pay less attention to them. That's one reason why when you look at a photograph, a lot of us photographers worry about the noise in an image. And then with experience, you learn that darker areas, shadow areas, tend to show more noise than bright areas. And we tend to think of that as being okay because we're used to not seeing detail in the shadows anyway. And one reason we don't see the details is because we tend to ignore shadows in real life. Makes it great for those hunting animals that hide in the shadows and jump out at you.
Right. Hey, Abbott, can you, just for people who might not be familiar with that term as it applies to photography, explain noise?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Scott. So noise, if you used film back in the old days, it used to be called grain. But basically what noise looks like is sand. It looks like grit in your image. And that roughness, that grit, tends to be worse as you boost the ISO of your exposure. So as you make your camera more sensitive to light, the noise gets worse. And at any time, the noise is worse in shadows. So if you take an image and you blow it up to 100%, you might see more grain in the dark areas than you see in the light areas. Okay, does that do it, Scott?
Yeah, great.
Got it okay? All right. And sometimes we will put that in on purpose. So some processing software lets you add film grain so we can simulate some of that old style noise. Okay, so that's the bit with the noise and shadows and discounting. In the image, though, we don't discriminate. So when we're looking at an image, our brain doesn't have a lot of reference points. And I mentioned last time that we tend to want to, our brain tends to process what we see so that it averages out to be an average shade of gray. So we auto adjust, if you will, to make the highlights a little less bright and the darks a little bit brighter, so we can take in an average sort of a scene. You don't have to think about this. This is what your brain does innately, just because we got a brain. Okay, so when we go and look at an image, and I like to think of it as reading the image. So when you view the image, we tend to mentally group items by how close they are together. So you can create more tension by, like if these two eyes behind me were farther apart, that would create more tension, and your eye would tend to bounce back and forth across those two eyeballs more than if I bring them closer and closer and closer. So we would group them. As a matter of fact, if I brought those two eyes far enough apart or put them in the wrong positions, you might not even group them as being part of the same face. We also tend to group similar items together. So for example, if you were to look at a croquet court that has some croquet balls, you know, out on the lawn, and there were a couple of the little goal posts over there too, you might group those so the balls are one element and the posts are another element. Okay, because one of the reasons we do that is we like simplicity. No matter how complex we think, we tend to like to simplify things. We'll simplify conceptual things into things called generalizations, and we simplify visual things so that it makes it easier for our brain to take things in. So for example, as Scott's talked about in other classes, and as I'll talk about some more next time, our brain will group points into lines, or points into shapes, or lines into shapes. We'll identify curves right away. Do you notice the curves on my owl's head? Do you notice the circles right away? And you notice the angles in his eyebrows? Okay, we tend to see those things very quickly, and we look for symmetry and balance. Images get more interesting if they're less symmetrical and less balanced. Having some of that tension has the effect of forcing us to move our eyes around the scene as we try to simplify what we're seeing in the scene. And if you're a photographer, part of what you want to do is have the person looking at your image look at it a bit longer than saying, oh yeah, that's an owl. What's your next picture? You know, so an important concept here is that in order for an element to be perceived, it's got to stand out from the background. Okay.
Have a question.
Yeah.
Go back one slide. Explain to me again how luminescence is shadow.
Luminescence is the relative luminosity of what you're seeing. So shadows are dark. The sky and some kinds of reflections are brighter. It's just how much light is emitted by the thing you're looking at.
Okay, so this luminescence of each object, how much light is reflected from each object, basically.
As a matter of fact, I'll give you an example right from your webcam, Co. If I look at your picture now, that's why I keep looking in this direction, because that's where your faces are all arranged for me. If I look at your picture, your face is mostly pretty dark. It's in the shadow, and you've got a little highlight. But you've got a picture behind you that's got a lot of reflectance. And you've got a bookcase or something on your other side that's got a lot of dark. So when I look at it, my eye has to work a little bit harder to make out your face because there's a tension. It's those two things behind you. You've got the bright picture, and then you've got the bright white china or whatever on that dark bookshelf. So you've got these big contrasts going on.
Okay. I think I grasp a wisp of the idea. Thank you.
They're hard concepts to get across because I can say the technical words, but until you start looking, when I was an engineer, we used to say you have to grok it. It takes a little while to grok. Okay, so all photos alter reality. We're going to have some fun here too. Got to have fun. So depends on the time of day. You may have heard of the golden hour. There's also a thing called the blue hour. You get a blue hour, then a golden hour in the morning, and then you get a golden hour, then a blue hour at night, you know, in the evening. And then you've got direct afternoon sunlight. And then light changes during the course of the year. So right now, where I live, I'm kind of northern, like Jeff is. And so the sun's at a relatively low angle compared to at the equator. If you're in Singapore or Hawaii, the sun stays at a fairly constant path all through the year. So in the winter time, in the autumn and in the spring, we get this heavenly light most of the day when it's not cloudy. And you can get these beautiful warm toned pictures to die for that you can't get in the middle of winter or the middle of summer, because in the winter the sun's too low, and in the summer it's way too high and you don't get the warms. We have the time of day, so the color, direction of light and the shadows. And then you've got your lens choice. And the way the lens choice affects things is both depth of field, and also to capture a certain scene, depending on your focal length, you might have to stand further away or closer to the subject. So I can capture exactly the same field of view with a whole bunch of different lenses depending on where I stand. Okay, and the farther back you get with a telephoto lens with a long focal length, the more compressed the image is, shallower depth of field also. And the closer you get with a wider angle lens, the more depth of field you have at the same aperture. So we can get this compression expansion idea while keeping the field of view the same, just by zooming with either our feet or zooming with our lens. And then you've got camera position. I'll show you examples. And then you've got your exposure settings. When you vary the aperture, you vary the depth of field. When you vary the shutter speed, you change how you can represent motion. So there's a lot of capability you have there to provide context for framing the image. So let's talk about reality and perspective and stuff. This is a fairly recent car show we had in Central Oregon. You see all the cars, that's why they're there. It's a classic car show. And this one caught my eye. I don't know why it caught my eye. I think it caught my eye because we got this little bitty replica of it inside. Okay, so, obviously bright red, interesting car. It's an old car by its way. It's an old Chevy, but the guy had painted it this like really bright red, caught my eye. So I took the camera over my head with a moderate telephoto, and I was standing back a little bit. Snap, there's the picture. However, I could also take a wider angle lens, drop down a little bit lower, move over a little bit, and this is a real picture too. All that happened was I changed the perspective a bit. I sure didn't change the car. Okay, then I could get down really low. I could do a Jeff kind of a number. And I could get really low with a super wide angle lens. I'm standing about 2 feet away from this car now, 2 feet. And look at what I did to that same car. And you got to ask, are those real? Are those accurate? Well, the answer is, well, sure they are. I didn't Photoshop anything in that. That's the way it was, used with the perspective I chose to use. This one is not real because I've obviously decolorized everything except for the car. Except the car is real. Okay, does that kind of help you with this idea of real versus not real? I was trying to help with that idea. Okay, it also helps to tell a story. And so telling a story, this Anhinga is at a JW Marriott in Orlando a few years ago. And so this is kind of a National Geographic shot. I got the Anhinga, he's posing for me. I got his scene a little bit, so that's pretty good, huh? With an ultra wide angle lens, that means it's a very short focal length. And I was, I was only not that far away from the subject. And I got some good depth of field. So that tells a story about the Anhinga. But I can make this story more interesting. I can put more context on it. Okay, I think that's a more interesting story than the first one. And the more you look at it, the more you can read into it. So, and the other more interesting part that I couldn't get is that the groundskeeper came up behind me. And he had a rake in his hand in case the crocodile came at me. But stuff like this, where you think about the whole story, not just capturing the one little piece you saw at first. And I watched this for a while because the crocodile was moving closer to the Anhinga, and the Anhingas, they were saying, how the heck could I get away? And eventually the croc went back into the water. Okay, so Scott, how are we doing on time?
We are just about out, actually.
Should I end it here?
4:58. Yeah, we probably should. We're about at the top of the hour.
Okay, let me skip right back to an exercise.
Great.
What I'd like for you to do before next time, this is the only other meeting where we're going to have 1 week between. After this, we'll have 2 weeks.
Right.
And when we start with the 2 weeks, I'm going to ask you to pick up your camera or smartphone or whatever and do something in the field. But for right now, a thought exercise might work as well. So just grab a piece of paper, think for a little while. Now you're not looking at anything. This is your brain talking. Think about what you like in images and what you don't care for in images. And what's going to happen is that's going to help you to think about a context in which you take pictures. Okay, so if you would please, then we'll talk about this for a little while at the beginning of next week.
Yeah. That sounds
Okay.
great. All
Back to
right.
you, Scott, I'll stop sharing.
Yeah. Thank you, Abbott. This was really terrific. And we'll follow up. There's a handout that Abbott has that I will send out afterward with the class notes. So, well, they'll be the class notes essentially. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. So please, you're more than welcome to stay in the lounge and chat a little bit more. I'll be there for a little while. And please give us feedback. You've got our 5-star rating scale, plenty of places to add comments, and share your experience. Also, please share your photos with us. You saw that email address here. You can always send any kind of photo you want to share. Just send it in to me. I'd love to see them, and I can share them with Abbott as well. And other than that, we look forward to seeing you again very soon. So thanks everybody for coming today. Thanks so much to Abbott for some
Thank you.
great instruction. And
I'm taking up a collection to buy an iPhone for Abbott. Anybody wants to donate, let me know.
Oh, then you have to get him to use it.
Yeah. I mean, I got a teeny little cell phone. I don't want to carry it with me. Heck.
I've got a cheapo Motorola. It doesn't take very good pictures, but it takes phone calls.
That's kind of like what I've got. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in a big phone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, everybody take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
Okay.
See you next week.
All righty. Bye-bye.
I'll be in the chat room for a while too if you want to ask questions.
Okay.